Welcome to The Explainer. In this one, we're breaking down a specific theological argument about women's leadership roles in the church. We're going to walk through the source material for this viewpoint step by step. Okay, let's just dive right into the central question, because this is what it all comes down to. The source material we're looking at today tries to answer this exact point. You look at these incredibly powerful figures like Miriam, Deborah, and Huldah, and you have to ask, if they were leaders and prophets, does that set a precedent for women serving as pastors or apostles today? We're about to walk through one specific theological answer to that very question. All right, the entire argument we're about to unpack really hinges on one single fundamental distinction. It's the difference between having a spiritual gift and holding a formal church office. Getting this distinction is absolutely key to understanding everything that follows. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got the prophetic gift. The source sees this as a spontaneous, direct message from God. On the other side, you have the ecclesiastical office, which is defined as a formal position, one that comes with governmental authority and oversight inside the church structure. Two very different things, according to this view. So let's break down prophecy first. The source defines it as a gift, a direct word from the Lord, and it points to scriptures in Joel and Acts to show that this gift is given to both men and women, no distinction there. It's seen as this direct spiritual empowerment for any believer. But then, in complete contrast, you have the role of a pastor. This is framed here as an office. See the difference? It's a formal, structural position of authority. The source uses 1 Timothy to define this role as one that involves ruling and oversight, and it argues that this specific office comes with scriptural restrictions on who can actually hold it. Okay, so with that gift versus office framework in our minds, let's jump into the Old Testament. We're going to see how this distinction is applied to some of the most famous female leaders you read about in the Bible. They're used as case studies to build this argument. First one up is Miriam. In the book of Exodus, she's straight up called a prophetess. No ambiguity there. But the source also makes a point to highlight that moment in Numbers 12, where she and her brother Aaron challenge Moses' leadership, and she gets a pretty serious rebuke from God for it. So the argument here is that Miriam's role was exhortative. She was leading women in praise, in song, but it wasn't ecclesiastical. She had a powerful spiritual gift, for sure, but the crucial point for this argument is that she was never part of the formal Levitical priesthood. That was the established religious office of her time. Okay, next up is Deborah, and she's probably the most common example people bring up to support female leadership in the church. I mean, she was a prophetess and the de facto ruler of Israel, a judge who led the entire nation to victory in battle. Now, the source material really zeroes in on this famous quote. This is what Deborah says to her military commander, Barak, when he's too scared to go into battle without her. So the argument frames her rise to power as a direct result of a failure in male leadership at that time. And because of that context, her leadership is presented not as a prescriptive pattern, a timeless blueprint to be followed forever, but as a provisional judgment. It's interpreted as this temporary, extraordinary thing God did in a very specific historical moment, one marked by weakness and male passivity. Then you have the story of Huldah. This is fascinating. When the book of the law, which had been lost for years, was found in the temple, who did the king's men go to? They went to Huldah, the prophetess, to confirm if it was real and to understand what it meant. So, according to the source, Huldah's role is a perfect example of an informative gift. She was this respected but passive resource who could provide God's word when she was asked for it. But, and here's the key part of the argument, this was not an institutional office. She didn't hold a position in the temple hierarchy. She wasn't proactively exercising authority over everyone. So we've moved through the Old Testament. Let's fast forward now into the New Testament and see how this argument continues to build. The source applies the exact same gift versus office framework to the prophetess Anna, who we meet right at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke. We meet Anna, who's described as a very old prophetess who literally never left the temple. She just served God day and night, with fasting and prayer. And the moment she sees the infant Jesus, she immediately starts speaking about him to anyone who would listen. So her ministry is categorized here as one of individual testimony and prayer. She used her prophetic gift to be a witness for Christ. But the source is really clear that this did not equal an official rank. She wasn't a priest. She wasn't part of the formal temple government. She was a gifted witness. Okay, so that's all ancient history, right? So what about more modern examples? Well, the source takes this same logic and applies it to the role of female missionaries, who, as we know, have been absolutely foundational in spreading Christianity all over the world. And here, the source lays out what it calls the pioneer principle, which is basically a three-step process. Step 1, evangelize. All Christians are called to do this. Step 2, plant the church. You start the work of conversion. But step 3, the final step in this argument, is to establish qualified local male elders. And this is based on the instruction in the book of Titus. And this slide really makes that final distinction crystal clear. You have these incredible, influential missionaries, women like Mary Slessor, who did unbelievable work in Africa. They are honored as a pioneer of mercy. Their evangelism is celebrated, but it's clearly distinguished from being a prelate of authority, meaning it's not seen as the same thing as holding the formal office of a bishop. All right, we've gone through a lot of individual case studies and principles, so let's bring it all together. This next slide is going to synthesize the entire argument that we've been exploring. Now, this slide is really helpful because it just visually summarizes the entire case. For every single woman we've talked about, from Miriam all the way to modern missionaries, it lists her role in the Bible, and then it gives the specific reason, all based on that gift versus office distinction, why that role isn't considered the same as the office of a pastor. And this leads us to the final conclusion of the source material. The argument is that the Bible shows a model of beautiful partnership, where men and women both use their incredible spiritual gifts for the gospel. However, it argues that a priority is maintained in government, and that the specific office of oversight, the pastorate, is a responsibility reserved for men. And so, that leaves us with a final, really thought-provoking question that goes way beyond the specific theological debate. How does this idea of separating a personal talent or a gift from a formal structural office, how does that play out in other areas? I mean, think about it in modern business or in politics, or even just in community leadership. How do we define authority, and where do we draw those lines today?